Clinton, I think you're muted. Can you hear me? Clinton. Clinton.
Are you ready for me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Clinton, hopefully there'll be an opportunity to re-record or deliver your remarks because unfortunately we had some technical difficulties and we didn't hear your wonderful remarks.
Yeah, I'm just seeing
So
that. That's not
so
okay.
so let me take it from here and then we can reconnoiter. I'm Dawn Wright, Esri Chief Scientist, and I'm extremely honored to be here for this incredibly important event. Happy Black History Month to all of you, and happy Lunar New Year as well. In this the year of the tiger, I want to extend a warm welcome to all of you attendees, and happy Friday as well. This session on mapping Black health and wellness, absolutely fantastic theme, which is inspired by the 2022 Black History theme that was established by the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. So we will actually be together for three series. This is the first in a series on mapping Black health and wellness by North Star. The next session will be February 15th on historic Black communities, preserving and caring. And on February 22nd, we will have Mapping Black Health and Wellness, Mapping Justice. but for this introduction to mapping Black health and wellness, I'd like to extend, first of all, a huge thanks to the primary sponsor for this event, Built International, Blacks United in Leading Technology International, which is a nonprofit organization which advocates for the inclusion and advancement of Black technologists globally. And for those of us who are able, I wanted to put in a little plug for Patreon. For those of us who are able to support North Star as a Patreon subscriber, I would really highly recommend that. I'm a proud patron in this way and appreciate the access to North Star events, of course, guides and primers. But this is also a very, very important way to help North Star provide grants and to help them provide the financial support for the technical platform costs for events such as this. Now, this is, of course, our introductory session. We're going to have a fantastic panel after my introductory remarks, conversations around Black health and wellness to get us started. But I wanted to first share some personal remarks. And I hope that we can all just relax, take a deep breath, as part of wellness. We made it to Friday, but at the same time, we continue to live in this truly strange, bewildering, challenging, and sad time. So we absolutely need as many coping and mapping strategies as we can get in terms of health and wellness. And for Black people, in the wake of our general anxiety, the pressures that we face, personal injury, of course, sickness, there are many other physical travails. I'm coming to you from the Los Angeles area here in Redlands, California. And as an example, last year was the worst ever year for traffic fatalities in Los Angeles. And our neighbors at Cal State San Bernardino in the Center for the Study of Hate and Extremism, they have found that Los Angeles had the most reported hate crimes among major US cities. We had even more than New York City, and this was a 71% jump, with 90% of those incidents being against Black people. Now, this was, of course, due to the pandemic, to backlash to social justice, the social justice movement. Some was backlash to the 2020 election. So we are constantly in crisis still in this year, 2022. We are constantly in the business of having to make the case for our very humanity. And along those lines, I'd like to really highly recommend a book that I'm starting to read right now, which is Black Agenda, Bold Solutions for a Broken System, edited by Ana Gifty Opoku Ajiman, which has tons of helpful evidence that we can use to communicate this. And Lord help us, we still need to communicate it. We still actually have to say it. It should not be illegal to be Black in America. And along these lines, there's a huge, huge need in the news and in the general media for more stories about racial inequity being represented in how we're thinking about data collection, how we're thinking about analyses, how we're thinking about how we map and analyze and get resources out, indeed, about health and wellness, healthcare, criminal justice, climate. So, of course, what we're going to be talking about this evening and the next two sessions is how we can all play a role in this. As per the theme of this event, there is a need for Black people to be at the table in decision-making positions, to change our communities for the better in terms of health equity. Indeed, this is about who is at the table when we talk about where, when we conduct the science of where, in terms of designing and implementing health policies. helping people to know where to get community resources, such as testing or vaccines, other forms of healthcare, healthy food, where to go for safe recreation, safe experiences in nature. So this is really about representation and how representation matters. To be sure, this moment in time in our society, in the world, has a lot to teach us. The pandemic and all the health inequities, the continuing protests against police brutality and against racial injustice, racial inequality, they are in many ways holding up mirrors to who America really is. If America chooses to look, and we can use maps to help them to look, maybe even to force them to look. And many of us, many of you are doing this already. But I've also been thinking a lot about kindness, because I think this is an important ingredient in wellness as well. It's an important part of being healthy and whole. So representation matters, but kindness matters as well. And I'm looking at my clock here. I have time to share personal stories, so I'm going to go ahead and do that for a couple of seconds here. I just want to share with you this story. I still think about this. This comes from when I was a graduate student in the early 1990s. And there was this one time on the UC Santa Barbara campus where I was going to school for my PhD, and mid-morning classes were changing. UCSB is known for this interstate highways-like network of bike paths throughout the campus. Everywhere you go, you can ride your bike to every single part of the campus. And when classes change, the traffic on that bike path is crazy. I mean, it really is like the interstate. So this one day, there was a student on crutches who was standing at a very busy part of the bike path, very busy intersection, and she waited patiently until she thought there was enough of a gap in the bike traffic, and then she gingerly set out with her crutches. But several of us watched in horror as a student on his bike seemed to come out of nowhere and knock that child flat on her back across the width of the bike path. It was a total hit and run because he kept on going. He never looked back to see what he had done. He was going too fast for any of us to catch him. But I will also never forget how another group of students quickly rushed to her aid, and in the face of more oncoming traffic, helped her to get across to the other side safely and helped her back to her feet, made sure that she was okay. Luckily, she was not seriously injured. But that whole incident, if that wasn't a metaphor for life, especially as we know it today, especially as we look at it through the lens of health and wellness for Black people in this society, I don't know what is. So my hope as a matter of health and wellness is that we will continue to practice that type of kindness toward each other, but toward everyone. It's a kindness that protects and reassures. It's a kindness that lends a helping hand, even in the face of danger. It's a kindness that overcomes a tendency to be impatient or exasperated or angry or militant with an individual or in a small group, even though we as Black people have so much to be angry for. It's a kindness that dares us to leave people better than we found them. And it's also a kindness that is devoted to truth. In fact, with regard to mapping, Esri just today released the Map Maker's Mantra, which is about truth, ethics in mapping. And that is a very important issue with regard to what we're going to talk about over the next couple of weeks. So I'll put the link to that blog post in the chat for everyone. So I'm going to end with my comments here now, and I'd like to have us move to conversations, a conversation with a fantastic panel of guests about Black health and wellness. So thank you so much for allowing me to speak and to share. And Clinton, I turn it back over to you. And Clinton,
Once
Okay.
again, I'm muted.
Yeah, thanks so much for that great welcome and for the personal story that you shared. I was reacting to that behind stage, and yeah, the times when we see those kinds of acts of inhumanity, sometimes wrapped around them, these acts of humanity really are telling and moving, and hopefully for many inspiring. Again, thanks so much. Next, I want to introduce you all to some of our other speakers. So first, I want to introduce you all to Dr. Lauren R. Powell, recently named among Fortune 40's 40 Under 40 in healthcare. Dr. Lauren Powell is the president and CEO of the Equitist. She concurrently serves as the inaugural vice president, U.S. Health Equity and Community Wellness for Takeda Pharmaceuticals, where she is spearheading the movement for health equity in pharma. As the founding leader of the Equitist, Dr. Powell helps public health and healthcare system leaders move from embracing health equity and anti-racism in theory to doing so in action. To find out more information about Dr. Powell, you can find her at the Equitist.co. For more than a decade, Dr. Powell has been immersed in broad and progressive leadership positions where she's been unapologetically outspoken about racial injustices and health inequities. Her professional and personal experiences spearheading equity efforts in healthcare, state, government, academia, and public health make her a nationally leader, speaker, and consultant on all things health equity. She earned a Bachelor of Science from Xavier University of Louisiana, a Master in Public Administration from the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, and a Doctor of Philosophy in Clinical and Population Health Research from University of Massachusetts Medical School. And joining Dr. Powell, we have Nick Okafor. Nick's a strategist and design researcher and is a senior associate at Sidewalk Labs, which is Alphabet's urban innovation company, where he drives commercialization for urban incubators, piloting and scaling emerging projects that improve quality of life through design and technology. He's also the creator and instructor of Mapping Justice, where he guides underrepresented youth in STEM on how to design geospatial tools for social change. He advocates for a radical rethinking of the tools that we use to create a more just and equitable society, and believes that technology paired with inclusive design and engagement can disrupt the sector for the better. Prior to joining Sidewalk, Nick was an associate at the Boston Consulting Group in the Washington, D.C. office. There, he partnered with clients to provide solutions in strategic operations and business modeling on a variety of topics, including healthcare strategy, corporate social responsibility, and renewable energy. While at BCG, Nick sought an internship with Planned Parenthood, where he led the development of a suite of digital geospatial tools and leveraged data analytics to direct market strategy for healthcare operations. Nick started his career abroad, pursuing social ventures in Brazil and Kenya, aligning design research to social change. Nick holds a BS in mechanical engineering and sustainable development from Washington University in St. Louis, where he researched the role community engagement played in housing upgrading programs in Brazilian favelas. Joining those two, we've got Kevin Carrington, the founder of the C3 Initiative. His passion for creating and inspiring is applied to everything he does. Innovation to Kevin is not just a one-time goal, it's a way of life. His life journey has led him through the public sector, nonprofits, healthcare, technology, education systems, and entrepreneurship. With each experience, he learns, gives, and grows. The hashtag I Care Everything lifestyle was one that he was born into from this journey as some of the key principles pertinent to each step of his journey. He realized at a very early age and at a very, very early stage in his career that disruptive ideas lie at the core of significant change and progress. Building Carrington Case is an outcome of an idea for a sleek design and professional appeal for accessories. He knows that that we have good accessories already in the market, but couldn't help but think of ways to outdo those accessories and do them better. As a fourth generation entrepreneur, he was raised in business school, and he uses the passed down wisdom from the generations before him in his creative outlets, business leadership, and within the community. Founding the C3 Initiative was part of his responsibility to the community from his perspective. And the C3 Expo, which is, I believe it's their annual event. It reaches young people who may not have had opportunities to be exposed to technology, capabilities like coding and other STEM components. And they seek to to inspire those who aspire for more. This work that he's done so far, he says, is some of the proudest accomplishments and the most exciting things from his perspective are still yet to come. You can find out more about the C3 Initiative at the c3initiative.org, and you can find out more about Kevin personally at mrcarrington.com. And with that, I want to bring all of our speakers to the stage and give them an opportunity to talk perhaps a little bit more about themselves. So everyone feel free to come off of bring the cameras on and turn on your mics and share with us if you can. Is everybody able to see and hear each other?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you so much for the great intro.
Yeah, I feel like we should do the present thing from school. I don't know if you guys remember that.
Oh, yes. Present.
So if you all can, maybe we'll sort of go round robin, but I want to share with the folks in the audience a bit more about your work and your roles, the relevance of your roles and your interest to the notions of mapping Black health and wellness. And maybe we'll start with you, Dr. Powell.
Sure. Well, good evening, everyone. Apologies for my background. I am sitting in a car. I ended up coming to visit family in South Carolina, and as you could imagine, some of their internet capabilities are not the best. And so this is the best signal I could get. So I'm sitting in the car. It is dark. I am not driving. I am safe. But I was committed to being here by any means necessary. So thank you for the invitation, Clint, and everyone else who is associated with North Star. I'm so excited to be here this evening. I think this is such an important topic. My work is centered on health equity. And to me, that means ensuring that everyone has the fair opportunity to live their best life. That means making sure we're removing boundaries like racism and other forms of oppression that keep everyone from having the opportunity to be healthy and well. What I spend a lot of my time doing is helping people understand what health equity really is. There's a lot of people who can talk about it. There are a lot of people who want to throw the words around, who think they're anti-racist, think that because they're able to say the word structural racism or say the words interpersonal racism, that they're suddenly anti-racist. I spend a lot of time educating people on what it actually means to be anti-racist and how we put that into practice in public health and in healthcare. That's kind of one side of what I do with the Equitist. And the other side, I work within a pharmaceutical company to actually help them operationalize the commitment to health equity. It's something that the entire healthcare industry should really be committed to. And I'm so excited to talk more about mapping Black health and wellness, because we know how important maps and data are, particularly to helping us see where inequities lie. Not only to see where they are, but to intervene on where they are. And maps have been just so important throughout COVID. That's actually how I met Clint, we were on a call for, the Commonwealth of Virginia when I was consulting and helping them at the very onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, and really, needing to be able to illustrate to people where the inequities lie, and leveraging our data to help us distribute resources equitably, not just to the places that we are comfortable with, not just to the neighborhoods we know and we like and we have friends in, particularly our government leaders who like to do what's comfortable, but extending our resources and distributing them to the neighborhoods and the communities that need them most. And so I'll stop there. I'm really looking forward to the conversation, and thank you for the invitation.
Thanks, Laura.
Great to have you. Let's go over to you now, Nick.
Great. Thank you again for bringing me here. It's so great to hear from everyone and to be a part of this really important conversation. Hi, everyone. My name is Nick Okafor. I use he, him pronouns. In my day job, I work for Sidewalk Labs, as Clinton mentioned, which is Alphabet's urban innovation arm. What we're doing there is thinking about how do we think about the future of urban technology and how can technology products and development actually be utilized to improve the quality of life in cities. There, as a strategist myself, I always think about impact. And when you're thinking about impact, and when you're taking technology and you're taking data, when you're taking any kind of investment and deciding how are we going to actually apply this to help people, you're thinking about numbers, and more importantly, you're thinking about place. And so in a lot of my work, we're thinking about what's the context that we bring to the work that we do, and how do we orient that into city? If we're placemaking, if we're launching technology, we're launching pilots, we want to think through how technology and spatial data can be applied that way to advise and inform the decisions that we're starting to make. I would say my night job is working on Mapping Justice, which is displayed here through an effort through Trouble & Co., an organization I've started. Through Mapping Justice, what we do is we bring in underrepresented youth and we teach them about GIS. We use GIS as a tool for them to, one, explore their own identity, explore their communities, and create geospatial tools for change. So they're creating story maps, creating maps, dashboards, in order to tackle solutions that are really critical to them, from transgender voting rights to food discrimination to equitable school policies. And I'll stop there.
And thanks for that, Nick. And so how about we hear from you, Kevin? Tell us a bit about who you are, your story, your journey as it relates to this discussion.
Oh, no problem. No problem. First of all, I want to thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be amongst all of these esteemed panelists as well. My name is Kevin Carrington. I am an executive leader at Loma Linda University Medical Center at our Marietta campus. And what I like to say is that's my healthcare work. But on the other side, I actually founded an organization called the C3 Initiative. And we are actually in the business of pipeline development. We are building a pipeline of 1 million African-American, Black, you name it, kids who are going to be the thought leaders, going to be the coders, going to be the makers, going to be the designers of today and the future. Our program was developed and founded on the idea that our kids already have the solutions in their minds. We simply have to give them the tools so that they can unlock them in this way. And so for us at the C3 Initiative, we found a very impactful and a very relatable way to teach our kids how to code, how to design, how to make. It's not a secret. This isn't something new that we haven't been doing for some years. Our kids have been making and thinking differently from birth. And so all we do is go in and show them that they can use these languages, C++. They can use these tools like robotics. They can use these other resources that are available to help solve problems. And so we've been working really hard at getting to that 1 million kid number in partnership with organizations like Esri, organizations like North Star, and other corporate organizations that share some share in our passion and in our work and our focus, and some aren't 100% sure what to do. And so that's where we come in and help their community service departments operate in the way that they should. Now that Dawn is back on screen, I want to show you guys something. Dawn, this is for you, so forgive me. I actually have my Millennium Falcon set, and I did it. I completed it. I'm excited about that. I love your background, and if I can swivel, you'll get to see all of my Legos and items back here. But I just wanted to just leave this last point with you. I really, really love what Dr. Powell shared, and I think there's room for all of us in the work that we're trying to accomplish. There are people like Dr. Powell who let's say, I'm from Brooklyn, so I know snow right about this time of year. And so there are people who have the snow plow. Those are the people who are pushing the individuals, the old way of thinking, the old thoughts out of the way. They're telling those individuals that they're no longer relevant. And that is a powerful work, and we really appreciate it. And it makes room for organizations like me and individuals like the C3 Initiative and individuals like myself to actually build the pipeline so that when she helps to remove those barriers, that there are actually talented, skilled individuals ready to take up the mantles and the problems of today. And then we get the opportunity to show them powerful, scientific leaders like Dawn to say that, look, you belong there. Not only do you belong there, you're operating there right now. And so I just want to thank you for being a part of this. And I'm ready to talk. Let's chat.
So I want to start talking about the importance of representation, particularly in health-related policy and services. And I think it's only right for us to begin that conversation with some of the folks in the healthcare space. So Dr. Powell, tell us, again, why is this important, and what do we risk when Black people are underrepresented or sometimes are the only ones in the room?
This is just such a vital series of questions, really. It's imperative that we have representation, and more than just representation, which sometimes I think can be interpreted by the masses as tokenism, right? We need more than just one person in the room. We need a contingency, if you will, and a quorum. And that to me, also signifies that we need power when we're in the room. But we risk so much when we don't have proper representation, especially in the healthcare field. I can't begin to tell you how many times I'm in a room and overhearing a conversation as though I am not there, or as though the folks in the room have absolutely no context as to lived experience outside of their own. And oftentimes their own lived experience is one that is laden with privilege, particularly white privilege, and one that is very suburban and middle class or upper class in nature, such that they don't understand that the decisions they make often have cascading impacts for people who do not share their lived experience. And so, so often I feel like I have to bring that perspective into the room. And there are times, where I can't be everywhere. So that is the challenge of being one of the only ones, right? I can't be everywhere. And when I can't be there, I wonder, does anyone else bring that perspective to the room besides me? When it comes to healthcare, no matter which side you're on, whether you're on supplier diversity, and we could connect that to COVID tests, whether you are in the emergency room and actually seeing patients, whether you're in pharma and perhaps creating a vaccine, wherever you are, your decisions matter, right? And when you don't have perspectives in the room that are challenging you beyond just your experience and beyond just your realm of reality, that has really residual and terrible impacts for everyone, but particularly Black people. I'll stop there for now.
I resonated with that so much. And as I'm thinking about from my perspective in products and technology, in my class, whenever we talk about technology, we talk about scale. You're taking one action, one implementation, and you're magnifying it, right? It's being done 1,000 million times over. And so as we're thinking about health products and technology and data, when you remove the Black experience, when you isolate it to only one perspective of a country or of a population, you're ignoring the experiences and the realities of so many others. I'm thinking of what happens when Black people aren't incorporated into certain clinical trials. What happens when you don't have Black designers, Black managers, Black engineers creating products? Suddenly technology doesn't recognize my type of skin. Suddenly technology isn't recognizing what's really critical to my blood and to my genetics, right? You're having these experiences to where what happens to one, you put it in technology, it's scaling surpassedly, right? And you have this experience that's being perpetuated across a population, and suddenly it's a huge amount of folks that are being ignored, that are being where data is being biased. And so it's really critical that we're in the room so we can bring that perspective to make sure that, are we testing the right scale of folks? Do we have the right diversity to make sure that if it doesn't work for Black people, it's not effective? If it doesn't work for every population that it's trying to achieve for, it's failed as a product. And so that's the mentality that we need to bring in, that it's not, well, it worked for me or it worked for this population. If it's not working for all the people here, then that product has failed and you need to start over.
You know, Clinton, I mean, that was very powerful, Nick. You know, one of the contexts that I've put that in conversations that I've had before is that, you know, this idea of diversity is not this metric item that someone can you know, check off on a box as a key performance indicator and identify that our organization is going the right direction. That's not what it is. It's a mentality. Diversity is a mentality. And here's what the mentality says. The mentality says, or it asserts, that every problem has perspectives. Regardless of what the problem is, every problem has perspectives. And here, you know, if a problem has a perspective, then the solution must have a perspective as well. And so when the conversation is about bringing individuals to a table, this idea of tokenism now goes out the window, and you really tap into the true benefit of the concept of having the right people at the table, because now you're designing solutions that meet the perspectives of the problem. And unfortunately, far too many times, we are left holding the solution that does not have our perspective involved in it at all.
And I'd like to, if I could, I'd like to say also, this is really important in terms of tokenism, because if tokenism persists, then we run the risk of losing what little advantage we've gained, because that one person gets so burned out and sacrifices their wellness and health, that if that person falls by the wayside, then we are really in a very precarious situation. So Dr. Powell's point about a cohort, not just one person, but a cohort, is absolutely essential, I think, to this. And speaking as a corporate executive who is a token, you get caught up in trying to suppress your own demons and it's detrimental to your physical and your mental health, because you are constantly on. You constantly are smiling and coming up with ideas. You're saying that you're fine when you're not. To show any of this means that you are weak in the current culture, especially in corporate America. And this does not allow you to be vulnerable. This does not allow you to oftentimes to seek the help that you need, because you are constantly being the one who has to hold up everything. And if you make it look easy, they give you more. So this is absolutely a huge health and wellness issue.
Absolutely.
And when I think about it's just so many things that you all have shared, from, you know, what happens when you're the only one in the room, and if you're not only the only one in the room, but you're the only one with equity, and what happens when you're not in the room anymore and someone else is in the room who looks like you but doesn't necessarily have a focus on equity, and so why it's so important from our perspective at North Star to do both of these things, recognizing that they don't always go hand in hand. You can't always force into reality that every person from a marginalized group, and when we're talking about Black folks, that every single Black person, though they may be personally and their family and their communities impacted by systemic and structural racism, they may not be the masters of how to deal with it, understand the interworkings of it. You may see it as oppressing you, but it doesn't mean you have the scope and scale of perspective to really realize how things are working. So we think it's very important to have folks in the room and also have the room focused on equity. And I think when you have folks focused on equity, you get more people in the room from diverse backgrounds, and you also get, the kind of conversation that you need to have. I've been in conversations around the pandemic where at times I've been, 25 people in the room virtually, and not only am I the only Black person, I'm also the only person talking about racial equity. Scary when you understand that in the context of health challenges, communities like Black communities that are disproportionately impacted by systems and structures in ways that harm us are going to suffer more. What are the things that we can do? What are the things that we can do to improve this? And also just to sort of what Dawn and Lauren have been talking about, what are the things that we can do on our own and sort of as a community around this to support each other and find the space that we need to recharge, because we absolutely need to recharge so we can reinvest our energies in all of this work. That's open to the floor. Anybody who wants to. You nodding a bunch, Dr. Powell.
Well, first, I thank you so much, Dawn, for just double clicking on that point. It's such an important one. In being new to the pharmaceutical industry, being new to an executive role, and being very often, if not always, the youngest person in the room, as well as a woman and a Black woman. All of the things that you've said resonate so very deeply for me, and I completely agree that this is the downside of tokenism. There are so many different downsides of tokenism, and as far as the point you just made, Clint, I can't help but think about the very relevant point of that topic, where around the headlines we've seen just this week around suicide, and very beautiful Miss Teen USA who committed suicide earlier this week, and the story of Regina King's son, and just the true challenges with mental health and wellness right now. I think it's imperative that we have this conversation too when we talk about health and wellness, because mental health is a part of total wellness, right? And the way we feel mentally and spiritually and emotionally is also a part of our health, and the two shouldn't be divorced. They are one and the same. And so when I think about ways to recharge, like for me, it is spending time with family. It is spending time in community. It is being recharged by my community. And remembering the purpose as to why I'm in this role. I think it looks like Sharon maybe had a comment about tokens, quote unquote tokens, that can't actually deliver upon our perspective. That I recharge by remembering why I'm in my position, that I'm not here just to collect coins. I'm not here to collect a check. I'm not here simply to deliver upon everything that my organization has asked me to deliver upon solely. That's part of my job. But the other part of my job is to open the door and leave it open, and make sure that I leave a crack, and that I leave some breadcrumbs, so that someone who comes after me will have a trail to follow. If not having me literally opening the door for them and welcoming them in. And that is how I recharge, and that's how I stay grounded.
I really appreciate that. Other folks have ideas on how to stay grounded. Also want to start to move us to our next topic that a number of you have a lot of knowledge about, and that's educating that next generation of GISers or geographers. So how are you staying grounded, Nick? And also, how are you embedding that sort of need to stay grounded in the work that you're sharing with the students in your program?
Yeah, no, I think the point of staying grounded is so key, and thinking about how am I recharging? How do I present myself as authentic in the workplace, in the classroom? I'm Black, identify as queer. I think about even just the first time I had a Black male professor, and that wasn't until college, right? And like, what does that lack of visibility do for me, and being able to see yourself there? I was really lucky that I had my dad was an engineer, so I saw myself in STEM, and I could push myself in that way. But then when I think about my work in education, it's those breadcrumbs. What are we doing to make sure that there are other people who can see themselves in this work? They can understand, why does my identity matter in this space? How can I present myself to work? And what role does the variety of identities that I may hold, how does that affect the work that I do? When we do our work with our students in Trouble and Code, Mapping Justice, we really think about ways that, what are the intersections between race, power, and technology in the world that we live in, right? Technology is changing, and we live in a society that is used to doing innovation at the forsaking others, right? We think about, who does innovation come at the expense of? Okay, we saw progress, we see colonialism, we see development. Who's left behind? Who isn't incorporated into those conversations? And so when we're thinking about what does it mean for us to be in the room, I get afraid when I think about what happens when I'm not in the room. What are the questions that are being posed? What are the actions that are being made when they don't have my perspective, when they're taking action from a very isolated point of view? But then also take it on the flip side. What are the perspectives that I can bring in, and think about who is missing from this room? Does this room have the right type of diversity to achieve, to make sure that the products and the services that we're creating are addressing the needs of the plethora of identity residents that we're hoping to hold? And so within our class, we always think about identity. We think about, what role do we have as technologists, as creators, as designers, and how can we use our perspectives? How can we use our lived experiences as well as our privileges to make sure that we're imparting change?
This notion on my shirt here, racism ? It comes out of a group that I helped to put together, at some point in the pandemic, when we're seeing what's happening to Black and brown communities. Some of us are experiencing it in our family. We're starting to see hate, against folks from the Asian Pacific Islander communities. And sometimes folks are looking at us as if we're crazy when we elevate the notion that perhaps that's racist, or there's some racism. And I'm watching a number of my friends and colleagues get burned out. And I'm experiencing it myself. I'm feeling myself get to a point where I'm getting burned out. So we built this community where we question it together. We question these scenarios together. We explore what happened in each other's experiences, and we try to, connect for healing, and to really say, we heard you. That's real. That did happen. Validation is something that we all need. And then we try to come up with ways to take that on going forward. And I think the other thing that has grown out of that is that we're all helping each other develop into people who can be strong and sturdy when we need to be in the room. And we are building our own sort of pipeline of folks who can be in the room when we're not. What are some of your thoughts, Dawn or Kevin, on how we can collaborate to build that contingent of people who can be in the room when we're not?
Well, it struck me when Nick said, what happens when I'm not in the room? Because oftentimes there is no time to bring in that contingent yet. They're too young, or they still have critical mentoring and growth that's needed. So for instance, I don't want to say I panic, but I think about this all the time in terms of at the corporate directorship level. If I'm not in the room, there is not going to be anyone who can come to the rescue yet. So it's absolutely critical to practice self-care. And I love this quote by Audre Lorde. where she said, caring for myself is not self-indulgence. It is self-preservation, but it is an act of political warfare, because you've got to keep yourself whole. You've got to keep going. You've got to keep yourself so that you can produce excellence, the excellence that is needed so that there is no gap. You've got to hang on until there can be more in the room. So this is why, again, this idea of, and I think Lauren touched on this in terms of the self-care, nourishing your inner soul and spirit with relationships, with Legos, with superheroes, all of that stuff matters. It matters. That's why all of this is behind me. And this is what I admire so much about what Kevin does, because of the community, the C3. So Kevin, over to you in terms of the communities that you're building.
No, I'm biting my tongue over here because this opens Pandora's box to me. I grew up in a household where my dad told me that if there is no door, build one. That is what I was afforded, that opportunity. And it wasn't until I got older did I understand the power of what my dad instilled in me. He gave me the power to be me no matter where I went, no matter what I did. And if a door closed, he gave me the authority. My dad gave me the authority to create my own door. Now, when we talk about the context of tokenism, there are some of us who are destined, whether it be by education, by right, by path, to be in that room and to fight through those types of challenges. That is not everyone's path. There are individuals who are going to follow you, Dawn. That's absolutely right. There are people who are coming behind you, but there are also people in this world who are fighting to build a table, build a completely different table. And unfortunately, here's the bad news. It's going to take all of us. It's going to take every single one of us from every single angle approaching this issue to solve a human problem. This is a humanity problem. There's a story that comes to mind, and forgive me for using this individual. I just didn't find, like Shaka Zulu didn't have a really good story that I found yet that will match this. But as soon as I find it, I'm going to use Shaka Zulu. But Alexander the Great was met with a knot that was tied by an Asian contingent. And the assertion was that if any man can undo this knot or can untie this knot, they will have all power in the world. Men came from far and near to try and untie the knot, to no avail. No one is ever able to tie it. Alexander the Great finds himself in front of this knot, and everyone obviously is looking at young Alexander, wondering like, oh man, will he be able to do it? Young Alexander pulls his sword out and slices the knot in half and says, I will not leave my fate to some philosophy or some spoken word to some man. Instead, he took his fate into his own hands, and he slit that knot. And whatever side of the world you sit on, his tyranny almost did it, right? And so there is this idea that there are individuals like Dawn, there are individuals like Dr. Powell, there are individuals like Nick, there are individuals like myself and you, Clinton, who are approaching this idea of being heard, being included from different angles, and it's going to take all of our angles. Now to the superhero thing, and then I'll be quiet. One of the amazing things that we found is that the imagery of African-American Black youth it's been shot. And over the last maybe 10 years, we've started to see just a resurgence of Black excellence and the power of that and the imagery of that. But kids are looking at excellence at a distance. Instead, they're still idolizing Superman. They're still idolizing Batman. They're still idolizing these heroes that cannot be stopped. And so what we do at the C3 initiative is we use scenario-based learning. This is evidence-based. This is scientific. We use scenario-based learning where we take kids, throw them in scenarios where they get to help the heroes that they know and some of which they don't know solve real-world issues and real-world problems. And what's funny is they learn a little bit like I did, funny enough. We look very similar. My grandmother, my great grandmother, when she taught me to swim, she grabbed me by my ankles at 5 years old and threw me in the ocean. And guess what? I learned to swim. Now, I wouldn't advise everyone to do it that way, but for me, it worked. And I believe our kids have solutions that are already built inside of them. They're already there. And so what we do is we throw them in the solution and let them figure it out. All we do is provide them with the skill set and the tools to figure it out in an avenue, in a lane. We say, hey, you need to use these tools at your discretion to solve that problem. And I am constantly recharged, constantly excited, constantly blown away by the fact that our kids are phenomenal problem solvers. And I get to play with cool superhero stuff and Lego stuff at the same time. So it doesn't hurt.
Kevin, what you're saying resonates with me so much. I think about what we do in Trouble and how it's so critical that the work that we do in our education needs to be, one, culturally competent, and two, based in experience. We learn by doing, and it's incredible the work that a student can do. If you give them a problem and they're excited about solving it, right? I think about a pair of students I had last year, and they're thinking about how can we think through voter discrimination within the transgender community. And then they're using GIS and they're using data to tell that story. It's a matter of saying not just, oh, it's this. You'd be surprised if you open up a textbook and how irrelevant some of these examples can be. I grew up in Texas, so you don't have to tell me about how some of our educational textbook can be. But even at its best, sometimes they're just irrelevant. They're not tackling issues that people are caring about. They're not tackling community issues, and it seems so far. But when the example is relevant to you, when you're using education as a tool to solve something that's critical to you and your community, it clicks. It makes a lot of sense. And so if you're using that as a driver to your own learning, it's one way to really accelerate how people are going to retain the knowledge and really see that I can do this. I'm not learning GIS just because I need to get an A or because I need to pass a test. I'm trying to solve a problem. GIS gives me this tool to achieve that. And so how can I use what resources we have in the classroom to get to that goal of problem solving?
That's so powerful. And if I could just circle back, you know, Nick, you hit on something really, really big. So for a very long time, the educational system has failed us, right? We spent a lot of time with this concept that math is hard, or with this concept that science doesn't make sense, or with the concept. And if we're honest, it's almost a delusioned form of education, because math absolutely does make sense. Science absolutely is helpful. And all of these things are tools that can be used to solve a problem. So if you want to suppress people's education, sometimes there are people who are, well, I'll skip that. There are sometimes we just completely turn off the relevance of the education that they're learning. And so, no, I tell our kids all the time, I would rather you have all F's and solve the problem than you have all A's and solve the problem. Because guess what? The grade does not matter. And that frees them. It's so crazy to me that it frees them to actually use all their energy, not at kind of pacifying this, you know, system that hands out letters but leaves the problems unchecked and unsolved. But instead, it has them skip. And let me tell you, this generation right here, I've never seen anything like it. They have caught on to the system, and they not having it, man. They're not having it.
You want to say
Something?
Well, I'll jump in. It strikes me that the guerrilla education, these innovations that are coming out of Nick's programs and Kevin's programs, these are not just programs for students of color, for Black students. This is how all of education needs to be. And so this is another issue where we need to have the entire education system pivot to this kind of learning. This is what our education team at Esri tries to do, especially with this experiential, problem-based learning. This all these modules that are coming out of that team and out of the Learn team that is part of what North Star and our racial equity initiative is working through. This is the way for those of you who watch The Mandalorian. Sorry if that was too obscure.
It was perfect.
I think this is your audience for things like Star Wars, The Mandalorian, Legos, this techie space, this sciencey space that we're in right now. I just want to acknowledge that we've moved to the Q&A open discussion part of the program. I want to have us engage in conversations about trends in health and wellness, trends in GIS. I want to learn more about what all of you are focusing on for the year. And we can just have conversations about your work, your passions, while we wait for questions to come in. So Dr. Powell, what are some of the things that you're moving forward on this year in your work?
Yeah, great question. And this is just such a great discussion. I wish it could be a podcast. Like there's so much that everyone's bringing up. So anyway, food for thought for future reference. But we're still very much focused on operationalizing commitments to anti-racism as well as commitments to health equity. It's so interesting where we are. We're in 2022, but the untimely and modern day lynching of George Floyd in 2020 suddenly made all of these organizations, from your local frozen yogurt place to like your CrossFit gym, suddenly come out and say Black Lives Matter, and we stand against racism, and as though these are new occurrences and they haven't been happening for over 400 plus years. And so we had so many wonderful and well-written statements come out by public health organizations as well as healthcare organizations, really committing very openly to addressing racism, calling out racism as a public health crisis, calling out, the allegiance to health equity, but falling flat on those words, not knowing how to move into actual operationalization. And so we're very much focused on that a lot. I would say what I'm beating the drum for the most this year is moving beyond declaring racism as a public health issue to creating a platform for it as a public health emergency. Right? There's a difference between a crisis, an issue, and an emergency. What we have seen, even illustrated through COVID, when COVID is declared an emergency, when anything is declared an emergency, it comes with money. It comes with the power to influence other systems to stand behind it and move in concerted action to help dismantle it. It comes with spotlight and urgency to move, right? As you think about the number of cities, territories, and a couple of states that have declared racism as a public health issue, that is not enough to me because it is an emergency, right? People are dying every day as a result of racism in healthcare and public health in our society. And people have been dying every day for over 400 plus years. So it is an emergency. It's not just an issue. It's not enough to be a little declaration on a piece of paper with no additional resources to come behind it, but it is an emergency. And so that is something that I'm moving forward with, really, really trying to get on the radar of our nation this year.
I feel that.
Racism is an emergency. Nick, what are some of the things that you and your organization will be moving forward on this year? I'm excited to hear about the growth and emergence of Trouble and Company in particular.
Yeah, and so for me, I think every day about what does responsible technology mean? I think it's one thing to have diverse people in the workforce, but what does it mean to have the responsibility to ensure that the work that we're doing is impactful, that we're not only maximizing opportunity for for helping people, but they're also minimizing harm. I think about how we're in a digital revolution and we're seeing technology adoption increase every day. We're seeing data being manipulated, but then also, unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of opportunity and outcomes that can be where data and technology can be weaponized for harm, be it purposeful or negligence, right? And so within Trouble, within my work, I think about what are we doing to ensure that marginalized populations and their voices are being heard in product development and technology operations. When we're thinking about how technology can be used by cities, there's a lot of opportunity there to make sure that we're creating chances for Black and Brown folks to thrive, but it's also opportunity of negligence. What happens when self-driving cars can't detect the color of skin of someone, right? What happens when you have coded bias in the judiciary system and suddenly one judge may be biased, but then that's extrapolated and magnified, and suddenly so many people have cases being decided based on some technology. I think about accountability. So when we're doing this work, I think about how does this really impact society, and with Trouble, really excited about opportunities to grow to make sure that I think Kevin mentioned this earlier, but students are the closest to the problem. And so if you give them the opportunity to actually create solutions and be mindful of the way that their identity impacts that, you have unbound potential. And so really excited with Trouble to think through how are we giving these students the tools to be able to understand how their identity affects technology and ways that they can continue to grow to you, whether it's maps, data, technology, what be it, they have these skills to make sure they're creating the change that they want to see.
As we close, I still want to hear from you, Dawn, and you, Kevin. What are the things that you're focused on this year? What are some of the things that you're excited about doing this year?
I'll go ahead, Don. So in my capacity as a hospital executive, one of the things that I've challenged, pivot is the word, that COVID has kind of thrown to the forefront of important skill sets. I think Forbes listed innovation as the top skill set to have in this particular type of market. What I've been doing is encouraging our organization to pivot in its mindset of responsibility to the community in which it's in. And so obviously, the work that we do is health provision. So when you are sick and ill, you come to the hospital, you present to the ER, or you're referred to an inpatient setting, and you stay in the hospital. But what happens after? What happens beyond that? What is our impact or responsibility to that? And so we've been having conversations in conjunction with our hospital and community partners to kind of, and if we can just build it as, if you can see it as kind of like a ripple, we are health in the center. The next ring is really about wellness. How do we help the community in which we live be well? Who do we partner with? Are there recreational centers that we should be partnering with as a healthcare organization to encourage? Are they rec centers? I grew up in the city, so playing basketball in a rec center made sense. Well, imagine if that rec center was partnered with or owned by a hospital that had access to education and access to healthcare and provision. And then beyond that, it's the idea of well-being, right? There are spaces that we should be operating in and having conversations from a health perspective where we're looking at the well-being of all the people in our community. And that really gets to a problem that has perspectives, therefore a solution has perspectives as well. So if we are addressing the well-being of one section of people without the other, we're not accomplishing our mission. So one of the things we're doing is trying to fuse our strategy and our mission with a global approach to our community. So we have not accomplished that mission unless everyone is experiencing what they consider well-being. Then on the C3 side, this is the fun stuff I get to do with kids. We have really been focused on building that pipeline, as I mentioned, of 1 million Black kids, brown kids who have these skill sets and can deploy them within, deploy them towards problems. So what we've been doing is partnering with actual corporations. We just recently, shout out, Esri has been a longtime partner of ours. We just recently partnered with Northrop Grumman. We've also partnered with a number of major corporations who are coming on board saying, hey, we don't know how to do this, but it looks like you're being successful in this route. And so what we're telling them is, what are the problems that you're facing right now? Let us think of ways to kind of simplify them. Let's put those problems in the hands of our kids, and let's give them a shot at developing some form of solution for those problems. And then let's create what I consider these loops where those kids who we've trained now get internships at those various corporations, or they get connected to accelerators where they can develop their own businesses and ideas. And that loop is where we are training, putting those kids in internships, hopefully developing employment for them. And so that's one of the big components we're working on at the C3 Initiative right now, is just working to fortify our pipeline, secure those loops so that we can start flooding the market and flooding the industry with tech fortified kids, GIS, coding, making, you name it.
Thanks so much for that,
Kevin. Dawn, I'm going to let you close us out. We're about 3 minutes over. And just as you do, I want to say thanks to everybody who was able to attend, and a special thank you to everybody here and to the folks who are a part of our North Star constellation of giving. Without you all, we wouldn't be able to do what we do, as Dawn mentioned earlier.
Yeah, thank you, Clinton. I have several initiatives as chief scientist of Esri, and a lot of these are in collaboration with Jack Dangerman, who runs the company. And at the top of the list is climate. I loved how Dr. Powell talked about the difference between a crisis and an emergency. And we are also in a climate emergency. And that climate emergency has serious implications for health and wellness for all of us. So we have a new community of practice within Esri on climate. And this community of practice cuts horizontally across the company. And the idea is to help the various teams at Esri work in collaboration with user communities. North Star, our racial equity initiative, is a huge part of this, because we are indeed builders and makers, tool makers. We help people to see through maps. So can we build better apps and approaches to uncover various climate emergency, health emergency issues such as heat illness, especially in Black communities. A lot of that is because there is a lack of shade equity. There aren't enough trees, there aren't enough green spaces in our communities. Air quality, another huge climate and health issue. Water quality, flooding, lack of preparedness or evacuation from tornadoes and hurricanes, the nor'easter that's been going on right now in the Northeast, other storms, wildfires. So it's the continued production of solutions and workflows and educational modules, data sets. We've been doing this all along, but another thing that we are talking about is taking the geographic approach to all of this, basically using GIS, the power of GIS to do it, but to do it well and to create things for people to use that are easy. It is not easy to make something easy to use. And we absolutely have to have that ease of use, especially if our leaders, our policymakers, our first responders, our community organizers are going to be able to run with all of this. So that's one of the big initiatives for me this year.
Sounds good.
Appreciate it. Thanks everybody for joining us, everybody out in the audience. Thanks to our great speakers here. Lauren Powell, we're going to take you up on the idea of creating a podcast, and maybe you'll be one of our first guests. Really so great to be in conversation with all of you today. Thanks so much. And please continue to join us for the rest of the series. Take care, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Clinton.